Morning folks, Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. What I wanted to do today was I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about shelter options again and tarp setups. On Facebook we have a discussion group if you're interested called the Pathfinder Learning Center, and in that discussion group, it's an open group, anybody can come there. In that group last week I posted a chart, basically it was a JPEG format chart that showed about 30 or 40 different tarp setups in line drawings of how you can set them up. One of the setups that was in that schematic was one that I'm going to show you today, and there are several videos on YouTube that show a very similar, if not almost exact setup to what I'm going to show you today. But my channel gets a lot of views, so I wanted to make sure I got this into my series. And there are other reasons I really like this type of situation as well, because you can use this to help get your kids into the woods. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit as well. So what we did was we went to just any Menards or Home Depot or any place like that sells paint supplies, and we bought a 6-ounce painter's tarp. And I was looking for one that was 8x10, couldn't find it, but I found the 9x12. That'll work just as good. 6-ounce canvas is lightweight, doesn't take a lot to pack it. No, it's not sil nylon, no, it's not a poly tarp, but those things don't seem to last as far as poly tarps go. They don't last as long as lightweight canvas. They're definitely not as fun for kids, and we'll talk about that later. And grommets tend to tear out. With a painter's tarp like this, you're going to have to put your tie-out points in it already because they're not going to be there. You'll have to manufacture them. And we're going to show you how to do that as well, and that's where we're going to start. So stay with me, guys. Okay, so real quick, let's talk about how these tie-out points are put into this tarp. And I'm going to take this one apart for you real quick. This is number 36 bank line. You could use any kind of cordage for this. I just used something that I had. Now, traditionally, mountain man type stuff, if that's what we're talking about, or we want to go back and be very traditional about this, what they would do is they would take a piece of canvas that was just, you know, a drop cloth of some kind, or a cover canvas, maybe for their packs, for their pack saddles, things like that. Maybe it was just a ground sheeting, maybe it was something that they rolled up in at night to keep the weather off of them. But at any rate, what they would do if they wanted to put tie-out points in that canvas is they would take, or oilcloth for that matter, is they would take a musket ball. And you could use a marble for this. I saw one guy using marbles. I thought that was a really good idea. You could use a round pebble, but you want to use something fairly smooth so if it gets stepped on and things like that, it doesn't get tore up. If you had a plastic ball, it would be much lighter than lead, and that would lend itself to making this tarp more portable. And I just shoved it into the corner, wherever you're going to put a tie-out point, and I wrapped it up inside there just like this. Once I did that, all I did was I took just a single piece of 36 bank line, about a foot long, and I tied a slip knot in it, just like this, that basically will tighten down as I pull on it. Then I took that round ball, gave myself plenty of overlap, came over the top of that round ball and cinched down on top of it very tightly, just like that. And then all I did was took the other end of this thing and put it down here and put a loop in it. And the reason I'm doing that, instead of just leaving that thing hanging out or making myself a tie out where the knot is on the other end, is because in case I want a pulley to this somehow, I want that loop in there. I don't want a knot on the end out here. I don't want a knot, I want a loop. In case I decided to run another line through this and use that for a pulley point with the line, I don't want a knot there, I want a loop. This is very easy to untie, move, and get off. Now let's talk about putting these tie-out points, how many and where on the tarp. Okay, there are a total of 20 tie-out points on this tarp. Start out just by, so you're going to need 20 marbles, 20 pieces of lead ball, 20 pebbles, whatever you're going to use, you need 20. Start out by putting one tie out in each corner of the tarp. Once you've done that, you can fold the tarp to find the line where you want the next tie out. Because what you're going to do is you're going to want one in the middle. So if you just fold your tarp in half, like this, you'll be able to find the middle. You'll want one in the middle on each side. Then you can fold it the other direction in the middle. I've got this laying with the 12-foot side long out this way and the 9-foot side wide. Wouldn't matter if this was an 8-foot by 10-foot, doesn't matter. We're going to use the same amount of tie-outs. So once I have folded it over, then I'm going to fold it halfway, and that's going to give me my tie point here. And I'll do that both directions. Once I've done that, I'll have all my tie outs that I need on the outside of this tarp. Then I'm going to want to put one tie out in the center here, one halfway between that and the back of my shelter. I'm not going to worry about putting one up here, only in the middle, and one halfway back, and then halfway in the middle on this side and this side. So that gives me 4 tie out points on the tarp itself that aren't on the edge. That'll give me the most versatility for setups of this tarp. Doesn't take up a lot of time to get this done, but you really would be better off doing something like this before you go out and use it. That way it's already done. Now, one thing about this tarp I was going to show you real quick is, and this tarp was like 1997, I want to say. It's got some kind of a coating on the inside of it to waterproof it, so that paint or things spilled on it don't leak through onto someone's floor. So this is probably not real robust. This is probably not going to last you for 2 or 3 years, but for a short-term camp, for something you throw in your vehicle for an emergency, or for something you're taking your kids out for the weekend to teach them about camping, that's a little bit better than just setting up a tent. You know, this thing would probably be the ticket for that. It's going to be nice and dry for sure, at least temporarily. Okay, now, most of the time I prefer a square tarp, but for this setup, a rectangle tarp really is what you want. And rectangle tarps are easier to find most of the time than square tarps. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come in one tie out point on the back side in, and if we want to make this loop smaller, we can just tie another knot in it. That's not a big deal. I leave them long on purpose. And we're just going to stake that down to the ground, just like this. And we're going to do the same thing down here. Again, one tie out loop in. And then we're going to tie, or put one stake right here on this back side as well, right in the very center. Just like this. So we've used 3 stakes so far. Now we're going to come around to the front. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick up our corner. And we're going to move that in one full grommet point. So we're moving over 1/4 of the tarp. And we're going to stake it down right there at that point. Just like that. And we'll do the same thing on this other side. We'll come in 1/4 even. And you're better off really pulling these things tight as far as against the other one. Pulling this thing tight against the other stake that you've got on the other end. When you do this, it'll make your shelter tighter in the end. Let's go back here and pull this one out real quick, stretch it out, and tie it down too. Good, like that. Okay. Now, that's pretty much the staking that we need to do right off the bat. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to pick the center of this up, just like this, and we're going to put a pole in the center of this shelter. And we can find any stick that's got a fork in it, and just put our tie out loop on there. Wrap it around there a couple of times. Get it hooked in there good, just like that. And raise that thing up to the height we want it, just like this. And that gives us a shelter. Now we can take these sides that are loose, tuck them to the inside. That'll give us a dry spot to put gear, or whatever the case may be. Now we can kind of shore things up a little bit. We can come over here and look at our stakes and make sure that they're tight. Reposition them a little bit if we need to. That's an easy fix at this point. Okay, now if I come back and remember we had this staked out and nothing else. If I drop back and stake this one out and this one out, leaving nothing but my fold under here, that increases the inside of that thing dramatically as far as the footprint, tightens everything up. If I wanted to tie this stuff out to trees and things like that, I could do that, but there's really no need to do that with this setup. So I kind of wanted to give you an idea of what this looks like from the inside. You can see that I can spread my arms more than completely out. I can sit completely straight up, so if I'm changing clothes or whatever, I'm still under cover doing it. I got plenty of place in here for equipment and gear. I got a couple of dry spots here. I can put something if I need to. But there's plenty of room in this tent, or in this configuration of a tarp, for 2 people. Even 2 adults and a child could fit in something like this very easy. So a 9x12 may be a good option for you if you've got family. But as far as I'm concerned, this is a great option if you have kids, period. And we're going to talk about that more in a few minutes. Okay. This is a different configuration of that exact same tarp. And this allows you to close the tent in completely. So if you're camping with mama, you're camping with kids, maybe you want a little privacy from the outside world, this enables you to have doors on the tent. Now, there's a lot of different ways you could set this up. I could have used a tripod up here, going across the back and 2 on the front, which would have eliminated these 2 guy lines and eliminated the center pole, which would have opened everything up in case I wanted to have a fire out here. Right now, I've either got to split these guy lines way out, causing trip hazards, or leave them where they're at and put my fire off to the side. But I do have the ability now to tie this thing shut, and I only have 1 pole, and I can open this thing up if I want to get air in there, and I've still got lots and lots of room in there. We'll get inside there and take a look at that so you can see how much room is actually inside there once I've opened up the doors. You still got enough room in there for 2 people, easy enough. Okay, I think you can see, looking in here, there's still plenty of room in here. I can almost stretch my arms completely out on the inside where it's guyed out. It's more than deep enough to sleep in completely comfortably for 1 person here and 1 person here. And you still got some room for gear. You still got these fold-ins right here that you could actually use to your advantage to keep you off the ground, keep your gear off the ground. But you probably want to put a tarp on the floor in here anyway, just to keep you off the wet ground, keep your gear dry. So I'm going to show you how to set this up real quick, because it's pretty easy too. But like I said, there's variations of how to set this up as far as your pole goes. You could use a tripod for this, or just a 1 pole type design like I'm using now. This just saves on lumber and cutting. Okay, we're still using the same number of stakes we used in our first design. And what we did the last time was we went over 1 grommet hole. And if you remember right, we had that corner over there. We went over 1 grommet loop to this side, and we staked it down right there. And that gave us our loop. What we're going to do now is we're just going to, instead of going the second one over from the corner here, we're going to go the second one back from the corner here. And we're going to pull that one tight to this one, just like this, and stake it down. What that does is that gives us our doors. Now when we stand this up in the center, we've created these flaps that now become our doors. Now, let's talk about our center pole for a minute. The other one I had was too short for this, so I went and got a longer pole, and it hasn't got a fork in it. So let's talk about what to do with no fork. Okay, so whenever possible, I like to work with loops. So basically all I did was took 1 piece of line, cut it in half basically, or turned it in half, doubled it over, and just tied an overhand knot in it. Now I've basically got a loop of line, and I prefer to work with loops. Now all I have to do is take a toggle and put it on this end. Again, toggles are the king. Those musket balls we've got in the corners of this tarp, nothing more than toggles. They're just round instead of oblong like this is. That gives us a toggle point. Now all I'm doing is taking the top of this pole and doing exactly the same thing. I'm going to put that lark's head type knot in there, and I can move this up and down the pole anywhere I need it, but as soon as downward pressure is put on it, it can't move. So I'm going to put my loop, my tarp loop, through this toggle and just push it up as far as I need to push it up and move it up and down the line until it's in the right spot. Okay, so now all I'm going to do is come over here, take my toggled loop, put it through the loop that's on my musket ball, just like that, and push it straight up. If it's high enough, that's great. If it's not high enough, I'll just move my loop further up my pole, because I know once I pull down tight on it, it's going to lock it in place, especially if there's bark on the pole. Now all I have to do is, I have to pull this pole forward. And you can see my doors will shut easily. And that's important to understand. Do my doors shut? If they don't shut, don't worry about it. You can always adjust things as you go if you have to. Now what we have to do is we have to get this thing adjusted to where it's not going to fall backwards. So I'm just going to lean it forward for right now, just like this, and let it sit. And I'm going to make myself another loop. And I basically took one of my 20-foot pieces and just tied it in half, just like I did the last time, into a loop. And then I'm going to find that center point of my loop and do the same thing. I'm going to put that same exact lark's head knot right on there, lift that thing up to where I need it, just like this, and pull it back and stake it out. And because it's a loop, I'm able to spread those lines out and put that loop down where I need it to two different stakes, just like that, so that I've already got that V spread out in there. Then I can adjust things where I need them from there. Get that pole straight, make sure my doors close all the way and all those good things. If I have to move my stakes a little bit, I can do that. Okay, so now let's talk about pulling out the sides, because with this design, if we don't have something to pull out the back, because we don't have a tripod on here, we're going to want to pull it out on the side right here. Again, all I did was took a loop of line exactly the same way and put a toggle in it, and I have a continuous loop. I put that toggle through this tie-out loop just like this, pulled it out to where I wanted to stake it, and then staked it into the ground. Very simple. Okay, so here's that second setup again that has the flap doors for security and privacy. Except this time we've set it up on the tripod at the Pathfinder school back here at the campsite, simulating a tree branch hanging over, where we could have just thrown a line over the top of that branch, pulled our peak tight on that branch, and then staked everything out and we're good to go. Now we have a no pole type design right here, where we've used a tree above us to pull our peak up, and that gives us plenty of open frontage area here if we want to leave these flaps open to get heat in from the fire, if we want to cook out here and things like that and sit in front of the fire, or right at the front of this thing in case it's raining, whatever the case may be. Then at night, if we want to, we can close these doors over, or if we need some type of privacy for our kids or our wife or what have you, same thing applies. We can close the doors at that point. Okay, a couple things real fast. Let's remember that everything is a trade-off. We have given ourselves security in the fact that we have doors here. Maybe that keeps critters out. Maybe that just makes us feel better. Maybe that provides privacy for our wife and kids. However, to do that, we've decreased our footprint dramatically. We went from a 3-man tent, basically, down to something that's going to fit 2 people. 3 people is going to be pushing it, unless you got a small child. You'll still be able to get some gear in there, but not near what you could have done with the original footprint of this thing with no doors. Now, let's talk about this thing for a minute as far as a learning tool, because I showed you guys this setup not so much because it's something that I would use all the time. I generally carry a square tarp like I told you in the past videos. I like a plow point design shelter, quick, simple up and downs. This is not near as simple up and down. However, for a learning tool, this thing is an excellent setup for anyone because it shows you the different ways that you can utilize a tarp to set up different configurations. The great thing about something like this is if you make something like this at home, take this thing out to a state park somewhere and camp with your kids and your wife for the weekend. You got a giant white piece of canvas here. Are you kidding me? Give your kids a couple cans of spray paint or a couple brushes and some latex and tell them to decorate the family teepee. hours and hours of enjoyment in the outdoors for those kids, and you'll have something that you'll cherish for a long time, and you won't want to tear up at that point. And then the kids can take it home, set it up in the backyard, camp out in the backyard at night. There's nothing wrong with that. Practice spending time out of doors where you're close to home, and you can get back if things go bad. That's the key to owning these skills, and starting kids out early is a key element to all of that, because that's where our future lies, is in our children. I'm Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. I thank you for joining me for this video. I appreciate everything you do for me, for my school, for my family, for all my affiliates, sponsors, and friends, and I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks, guys.